Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the amendment of the Public Finance Management Act, Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 3 of 2019. From the onset, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to congratulate Senator Zani for coming up with a very timely amendment to the PFM Act. I'm one of those people who believe that the PFM Act should be overhauled entirely so that it can be able to really fall into this issue of devolution. Because when the PFM Act was enacted, it was pre-devolution. And there are so many things that are happening now and in terms of technology which we must take into consideration. We've been having a big issue, Mr. Speaker, sir, on counties collecting on-source revenue. In fact, the last meeting we had with CRA is where CRA was now trying to come up with avenues to be able to sort of like, what is the word? Reward counties that collect more money through fiscal responsibility. This bill, in essence, Mr. Speaker, sir, tries to deal with that issue and encourages counties to be prudent in their revenue collection. One of the biggest problems that we find is that a lot of these counties, either there's a lot of capacity challenges in terms of their accounting officers, or it's just pure corruption. Mr. Speaker, sir, while we were looking at the accounts of Kiambu County, we were shocked to see that counties were merely using templates from the national government, whether it is true or not, to be able to account for or prepare their budgets. Some of those templates also include the issues to do with revenue collection. A lot of counties, Mr. Speaker, sir, if you ask these counties to provide you with a chart of account showing all their revenue streams, you'll be surprised that not all counties can accurately give you all their charts of accounts. In fact, some of them, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I challenge my colleagues to look at the financial statements presented by various county governments, you'll be surprised. Because 2016-2017 and 2017-2018, if you compare the two financial years, or any financial year that you choose to compare, the figures will be different. You will see that in this one account, it is 0, but in the previous year, it had about maybe 40 million shillings. And these are fixed assets. These are revenue streams. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, this amendment, and I hope that we'll take this amendment seriously, and I hope that Treasury is looking at it so that they can start being proactive, thinking and saying we've got 47 different county governments. On these 47 different county governments, each of the 47 county governments have certain revenue streams. Give an example, Mr. Speaker, sir. Narok County, we have the revenue that comes from the Masai Mara Game Reserve. We've got revenue that comes from parking services. We've got revenue that comes from maybe sales collection. Once these are defined, and what I like about the first amendment is that it calls for a consultation between the county treasurer and the Ministry of Treasury, so that they can say, okay, these are clearly your revenue streams. Let us define this sort of like general revenue collection system, but become specific, so that we don't have to come up with excuses later on and say we were given a template by the IFMIS, or the IFMIS was not working properly. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, this will not only help us be able to, or help counties to generate more revenue or on-source revenue, but it will also help the country in general be able to say, County X is doing very well here, let us learn from them so that we can also be able to improve. When you travel, Mr. Speaker, sir, and particularly to the UK, when you go to Gatwick Airport, you will see a big screen. And that screen tells you that in Scotland, the amount of money that the country has collected from tourism is X amount. I would like to encourage Senator Zani to think about incorporating an aspect of where we use technology to be able to show this competition among these county governments. Because if these county governments have X amount of money through parking services, everyone in Kenya should be able to tell that Nairobi County government today has collected X amount of money. Mr. Speaker, sir, it's wishful thinking, but it is something which is tenable. This country has been a first in many. There are certain areas, Mr. Speaker, sir, and you will see that all these multinational corporations that are coming into this country are choosing to become cashless. If you go into Carrefour right now, you don't spend and you don't pay with Kenya shillings. You use cashless. You use these electronic wallets to be able to pay. It would be good if at one given time, the entire country will be cashless. And we can be able to sit down and take an application and say, I want to see the 47 county government and I want to see how they are collecting their revenue. Mr. Speaker, sir, this will also help the Commission on Revenue Allocation be able to come up with proper avenues on how to reward those counties on fiscal responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other thing that I find very attractive in this amendment is that it will encourage competition. Because if CRA is there and they're saying, let us look at this county and how much they've been able to generate in terms of their online platform and reward them for having done that, it will help counties set up realistic budgets, set up realistic goals in terms of their on-source revenue, but not just come up with figures just to inflate their budgets and they never achieve. One of my biggest pet peeves, Mr. Speaker, sir, is where you see a county government that is only collecting 100 million shillings and it is receiving 5 billion shillings from the shareable revenue and coming up with a budget of about 10 billion. Where are we going? Where are you going to collect the other revenue to be able to tell? I'm happy to note that the senator has thought about transparency. This is one, if you look at all county governments as we speak right now, where there are so many loopholes, Mr. Speaker, sir, is on-source revenue. And the judiciary is not even helping. Because this house now, you will be shocked to learn that already there is a ruling from the judiciary that says that this house has no business looking at on-source revenue. So the best we can be able to do, Mr. Speaker, sir, is to come up with legislation that will be able to circumvent that decision in a way that what we are tasked with by the Constitution to do in defending the interest of county government and also oversighting county governments is to ensure that the laws that we come up with, because that is our job, will protect those county governments. Right now, Mr. Speaker, sir, most counties that have one revenue stream where everybody knows that is where money from that county comes from, they don't look at all the other issues. And that is why in most cases we complain and say, in some of our own counties, we are only relying on one revenue stream and we forget the rest. In Narok, we rely heavily on Masai Mara. You know, in Samburu County, we rely heavily on tourism. In Isiolo County, we rely heavily on tourism. But yet we are saying there's a lot of economic growth. No wonder, Mr. Speaker, sir, a lot of people are saying, let us fold some of these counties because they are not collecting any revenue. It is time that we use technology wisely. You know, I'll be very happy, Mr. Speaker, sir, if Senator Zani think of adding another amendment to this PFM Act that, in terms of the rewards, that looks at the use of technology more broadly to identify all revenue streams. If you go into Narok County, Mr. Speaker, sir, you might find that we have about 1,000 or maybe 10,000 plots. That's one revenue stream. But if you compare the amount of money collected from plot rents, it is not consumable to the amount of plots that we have. If you look at Narok County produces almost 70% of all the wheat that is consumed in this country. But the amount of cess collection, cess which is charged to, or the taxes which are charged on vehicles that are transporting wheat, is not equal to the amount of wheat that we contribute. So I think this bill will not only help ensure transparency, but it will also help counties become innovative on how they can be able to now identify all their revenue streams. Finally, Mr. Speaker, sir, this bill, or this amendment, which are being introduced by Senator Zani, will also help the national government become more realistic. And it will help our fight to have more money sent to county governments. Because if we have one central location that shows the amount of money which are being generated locally, it will ease the work of the Auditor General in terms of looking at all this. It will also end this constant excuse given by county government that IFMIS was down. Because there's no way it can be down, yet in Treasury, or rather if it's out there in the public, and we know that Nairobi County collected R1 billion shillings from taxes, from parking services, every Kenyan will know. So there's no way you can come and tell us that this system has died or something like that. One of the things that I agree with the previous speaker, my colleague, Senator Farhia, is that we might need to consider how do we encourage young companies that are into the revenue collection system be able to fit in. So if there's a way that Senator Zani can be able to increase an amendment here, maybe to Section 160, where you give these companies that have invested heavily in revenue collection system an avenue to consult. Because if the capacity of a particular county is still below average, yet there is a business or a company that is doing business there that has got a good revenue system, I think in Section 160A, we should include other revenue collection companies that can be able to offer the same services. Because when you look at the Kenya Revenue Authority, a lot of businesses in Kenya, may it be government entities, may it be private bodies, they're all tax collectors. And when you're paying VAT, they still retain a certain amount of about 6% or something like that. I'm not so sure on how we are going to, with this amendment, how we are going to address the issue of the taxes which are paid to the national government. Because with the last financial amendment on the Finance Act, there was an amendment that required each county government to charge an extra 15% on the licenses and fees that becomes money that is owed now to the Kenya Revenue. So we may want to look at that and say whether this amendment will help the Kenya Revenue increase their collection, because each county now, if it is license fees and they are all in this automated system, once they charge that 15%, let's say for instance, Mr. Speaker, sir, if a license fee is about 6,000, the law as it is right now requires each and every county to charge an additional 15%, which is money which will now be submitted to the national government. So we may want to find a way, because it might help, but it might also deter a lot of people, or rather a lot of counties, from utilizing this system, because they'll say, now the national government will be able to tell how much we are collecting from our parking fees and from our license fees. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, with those many remarks, I fully support this amendment, and I once again thank Senator Zani for thinking about ONSA's revenue. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.